We're going to work very hard to get it done quickly and done properly. That's what Donald Trump told Michael Gove when he asked him whether the US would do a trade deal with the UK. The former Justice and Education Secretary and prominent Brexiteer now writes for The Times, and he was not offered an interview with the President-elect, the only one he's given to a British journalist. Well, Michael Gove joins us here in the studio now. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Sarah.
And let's start on this question of trade, because it is quite a headline, the idea that a trade deal post-Brexit between the UK and US can be done very quickly and well. It makes it sound very easy, and it's just not, isn't it?
Well, I'm not a trade negotiator, but the President-elect is a deal maker, and he's confident that he can get a good deal, a win-win for Britain and America relatively rapidly.
Which means what?
Well, I think, judging from both the interview and also from the conversation that we had off the record, he wants to see Theresa May as quickly as possible. He wants to invite her to the White House as quickly as possible and then lay the groundwork for a deal. My understanding, I have to stress I'm no expert in trade negotiations, is that we have to wait until Britain has concluded its divorce from the European Union before we can sign any new deal. But I think that the President-elect wants to have something signature ready at the earliest possible opportunity. And I think there are two reasons for that. I think, firstly, he sees real economic benefits for both Britain and America in forging this deal. The other thing is that he feels a certain, sympathy for Britain as a result of our decision to leave the European Union. He was keen to stress in our interview he'd predicted it, he welcomed it, and he wants to make it a success.
So your understanding was that there would be a trade deal ready to go in 2019?
Well, again, I have to stress that this was an interview with the President-elect, not a negotiation with his trade representative. But it's clear from what he said, from his demeanour and his enthusiasm, that he wants it done, as you said, quickly and properly.
But we are not even meant to enter into negotiations until the UK has left the EU, and that won't be until 2019.
I think that if the potentially most powerful man in the world in a few days' time says that he wants his country and your country to have the strongest possible economic relationship, and he wants that done quickly and well, that is it's a gift horse that some will be inclined to look in the mouth, but I think overall it is a good thing and a contrast from his predecessor that the President-elect, whatever his other defects, whatever criticisms might be directed against him, wants to have a strong economic relationship with the Prime Minister and with Britain.
Of course, many people not necessarily looking a gift horse in that mouth, just looking at the reality of the situation, look at whether it's pharmaceutical companies who would, but there'd have to be some deal with the nice guidelines. Hard to imagine the Americans doing that. UK farmers, happy to open up to competition from the huge US agricultural groups. I mean, there are GM foods from the United States. I mean, all these things would surely need to be worked out. And you were left with the impression that he would reach a deal on that within...
He wants a deal very quickly. I've been impressed separately by work that's been done by Shankar Singham of the Legatum Institute, who's probably, at the moment, in Britain, the leading expert on trade deals. And he's pointed out that it would be possible for Britain to conclude a deal, not just with America, but with other countries like New Zealand, whose Prime Minister was here recently, who also indicated that he wanted a beneficial trade deal. Shankar Singham has concluded that such a deal could increase Britain's GDP and jobs and growth significantly. And I'm inclined, there are some experts, of course, whom one doesn't automatically follow, but I'm inclined to believe that Shankar Singham and the work that the Legatum Institute has done points the way to a successful trade relationship between Britain and other countries. And it's certainly the case that at the high level at which the President-elect operates, he's enthusiastic for that sort of vision.
OK, but not as enthusiastic as he might have been prepared to be, given that you said, would we be at the front of the queue? Because President Obama had said we'd be at the back of the queue. He didn't answer that question. He did not. He notably did not say yes.
One of the things about interviewing President Trump is that he doesn't like anyone putting words into his mouth. So when you ask a question, it's as much a prompt to the next flow of information and rhetoric as anything else.
But he's committed to nothing, is the...
Well, I described his conversational style as being like a river in spate, and you throw pebbles into it, and sometimes there are eddies and currents, and from that you can read what it is that he wants. And it is clear...
Can you read that? Because given what we know, that he's changed his mind so often in the past, and did you trust him?
Well, This is the first time I met him, and one of the things I would say is that I can't make a window into Donald Trump's soul. But what I can tell is that he was enthusiastic about Brexit. He feels, in a way, a vicarious sense of ownership. He said in the interview that he predicted it. He mentioned the occasion when he came to Turnberry in Scotland to his golf course the day after the vote, and he celebrated it. He stressed that he believed that the European Union would potentially break up in the future and that other countries would leave. So, in a sense, he's both emotionally and financially invested in it. The other thing, of course, is that as well as that emotional investment, I think it's important to stress that he is a deal maker. He's a transactional politician, and he sees economic benefits for both Britain and America in that trade deal. And while I would say that, of course, there are all sorts of criticisms that one can make of Donald Trump. Some of the things he said in the past are outrageous and, as the Prime Minister has said, indefensible. But if you are making a decision about what's in the best interests of this country and what's in the best interests of people's jobs, then I think a good relationship with the incoming administration is a good thing.
We spoke to the man who's been touted as the next American ambassador to the UK, Theodore Malloch, an hour ago, and he almost seemed to be suggesting that one of the American policy could be almost to lure other countries out of the EU. Now, he made the point, you've said it in your interview, that he had said other countries will leave. Do you think there's almost a deliberate policy on the part of the United States to destabilise the EU?
No. We asked Donald Trump what his view was directly about the European Union. Did he believe that it was better for America for there to be a strong European Union or stronger individual nation states? And he said that, in a sense, he didn't have a strong view either way about the future of Europe from America's point of view. He said specifically that he felt that the European Union had been created in order to have a rival trade bloc to America, but he concentrates on what's right for America. He believes that it is right for America to have a good trade deal with Britain, he explained, and he was speculating about the future of the European Union from the point of view of someone who admired what Britain had did, regretted some of the decisions that Angela Merkel had made, didn't wish the EU to break up per se, but believed that it might well, as a result of the strains that both the Euro crisis and the migration crisis had placed on the continent.
Indeed, he described Angela Merkel, German Chancellor's decision to allow 1 million refugees or asylum seekers and refugees into Germany as catastrophic, and he suggested that immigration was the reason that people voted Brexit. Do you agree with that? Do you agree with the assessment that actually, if Angela Merkel had not followed that policy, perhaps the UK would have voted differently?
No, as it happens, I disagree with him on that. I think that the reasons why Britain voted to leave the European Union are complex and multi-layered. The best analysis of them has been done actually by the Conservative peer Lord Ashcroft, and it seems that the principal argument that prevailed with people was a desire to have democratic control taken back from Brussels to Britain. That was actually, so all the research, the academic and polling research suggests, the strongest reason. However, it's undeniably the case, and Donald Trump, for his own reasons, puts a particular emphasis on this, that the European Union's handling of the migration crisis, of course, was a backdrop to the not just the decision that Britain took to leave the European Union, but to the troubles that individual governments in Europe are now facing.
This enthusiasm that you felt from him, if the UK follows up on it, do you think there is perhaps a danger to what it means for our relationship and our negotiations with the EU?
I don't think so. I think that it's another card in Theresa May's hand. Over the course of the last week, we've seen the government's position, I think in the eyes of most neutral observers, strengthen. We've seen Michel Barnier acknowledge that the strength of the city is vital for the European Union. We've seen Philip Hammond make the point in Welt am Sonntag, the German newspaper, that Britain can change its economic model in a way that if the European Union wants to hang tough, then we can respond to.
And do you support that? You have argued for that.
I think the Chancellor is right to take the position that he has. And this is another, as I say, card in the Prime Minister's hand, another arrow in her quiver, because the European Union until now has been assumed to have a better hand to play. But the Prime Minister, we now see, has actually cards in her hand, including, no
How
pun
do you think
intended,
she's
a
played-
trump, which will enable her, I think,
How do you
to be
think
able to
she's
secure a better deal.
played her hand so far?
I think she's done an exemplary job.
When did you last talk to her?
I last talked to the Prime Minister direct before Christmas.
To say...
It was a private conversation.
But you would argue, you have argued, that the UK should leave the single market and leave the customs union?
I think that is the logical consequence of the vote that occurred on June the 23rd.
And should she spell that out tomorrow?
Well, that would be my suggestion, but the point I would make is that the Prime Minister, as I say, has cards in her hand, but she should play them as close to her chest as she thinks is right in the national interest. I'm a backbencher now, I'm a commentator. I can have a view on this matter, and I've expressed my view in the pages of the Times, and I will on Radio 4.
And you want to vote on it, though, as a backbencher. You have, and presumably that is what you spoke to her about, urging her to give a vote.
It was a private conversation, actually, a general conversation, just before, a little bit before Christmas. But no, I'm a backbencher like 600 odd others. I've got views on this matter, views that I've articulated, but I draw a distinction between the views that I would articulate as a backbencher and a supporter of the government and the decisions the government has to take. And I think that the Prime Minister should be cut a little bit of slack in order to ensure that she and her team can negotiate the best possible deal in Britain's interests. I've outlined my view, but the Prime Minister, by definition, will have access to briefings, intelligence and advice of a quality which I can't possibly hope to emulate, and therefore I'll defer to the decisions that she makes in the national interest.
You are the second British politician to have met Donald Trump since he's been elected. There will be some people who suggest, who perhaps think that you could be a candidate to be a future British ambassador.
Well, I think you can probably tell from my instinctive reaction to that wonderful as the Foreign Office is, it's probably better off without me as one of its ambassadors. We've got Kim Darroch doing a fantastic job in Washington by all accounts. Certainly from the encounters I've had with him, he's a first-class diplomat.
You'll have to work with the Foreign Secretary, of course, again, Boris Johnson. Well,
I think Boris is doing a very good job indeed. One of the things that I was told while I was there is that the relationship that Boris had forged with members of the Trump team had been strong, and they appreciated his combination of friendliness and candour.
You were, as I say, you were approached by Donald Trump offered this interview. You approached it, I mean, you are a journalist, but you are also a politician. And that is one of the criticisms of this, that it comes across as a big puff piece for a Brexiteer.
Well, the interview was conducted not just by me, but also by the Kai Diekman, the distinguished former editor and correspondent for Bild magazine. It was a joint interview with the Times and Bild. We both asked questions, and I think it's fair to say that I mentioned earlier that Donald Trump has a particular conversational style, and we prompted him, we asked questions, we put it to him that some of the election promises that he made on, for example, banning Muslims from coming into America or ripping up the Iran deal were things on which he was now going to have to row back, and he did acknowledge that in the interview. So we did put a variety of questions to him. We covered a wide range of issues, and we did so as a means of drawing out for, not just for a British, but for a European and world audience, what to expect from the president-elect.
There's an image of you, which is very prominent on Twitter, thumbs up next to Donald Trump. I wonder, it prompts the sort of thought that perhaps you liked him. Did you like him?
I found him engaging, yes. Now, I have to stress, there are some things that Donald Trump has said and done in the past, which I would never want to defend. I mentioned earlier the Prime Minister, when asked directly about the comments that he'd made about women, which were recorded some time ago, said they were indefensible. They are indefensible. And I think it's also the case that some of the policy positions that he has both articulated during the campaign and that he has now are policy positions that I could never endorse. But in meeting the president-elect, I was determined to ask questions and allow his responses to speak for themselves. And I think the most important thing is for people to form their own judgments about Trump on the basis of what he says and what he does, rather than me trying to provide a glossary on that.
Michael Gove, thank you very much.
We will make America great again.